thank you, everyone. Good evening and a warm welcome to join us this evening, celebrating 20 years of Voice for Change, our AGM annual general meeting, but also celebrating 20 years of voice power and hopefully bringing about some positive change. If we could move to the next slide, please. I'd just like to remind ourselves, we make sure that we are all on mute so that we don't get any unnecessary echoes. Thank you. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce myself as well. But if colleagues during the course of the evening wish to introduce themselves to each other so we know who's attending our AGM, please do write your name and the name of your organization in the chat. Our colleagues are making a note of that in the background. Thank you. And obviously this session is being recorded, so feel free to turn off your camera if you don't wish to be seen, because I know at Voice for Change, our staff really love to capture pictures and photographs. So yes, please do that. So I've made that announcement. And also use the chat function, colleagues, please, if you have any questions or comments to make during the session, as we have two guest speakers this evening as well joining us. So if you have any questions, do please put them in the chat box. So I'm going to make a start introducing myself. So next slide, please. So I'm Nina Samota. I'm currently chair of Voice for Change England, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all this evening. Thank you for joining us. I think it's really good to reflect on the year gone by, and it's really important to note that obviously Voice for Change, you understand we're an infrastructure organization, and thank you for supporting us for all these years. Some of you joining us today we have known for a long time, and some of you might be joining us today who we've met recently through many initiatives and activities that we do together with you. But our mission extends beyond this infrastructure support, and I'd just like to reflect for a moment about the work we do and the importance of that work, because at the core of our work, which is infrastructure support, is actually a commitment to promoting equality and diversity and advancing racial harmony, and also fostering kind of social inclusion. So we work hard towards achieving that through the various activities that we do. We're also here to support Black and minoritized ethnic communities, strengthening their voices and also expanding opportunities and ensuring their full participation in society. But as we also kind of think about the work that we have done in the last year, quite, a significant change has been occurring elsewhere. There are political uncertainties, there's the broader global challenge, and around the world we are witnessing, economic instability, ongoing conflicts, cost of living crises, not just here, but also elsewhere that, reaches out to, communities that we are linked up to and tied up with, in our home environments or home countries, but also this very noticeable shift in kind of the political discourse and in how, these issues that we work towards about inclusion and racial justice are being spoken about, and often sometimes being deeply contested, but also in many areas being deprioritized. So we are keeping a note of that. These are kind of global dynamics, but they don't exist in isolation. They are deeply felt within our communities here in England and also elsewhere, but also, the hardship that brings disproportionately, as we know through our work, does impact adversely Black and minoritized ethnic communities, and actually widening those kind of inequalities and the gaps. So public services, as we know, in the different areas of work, I teach at university as well, so I know I'm familiar with, the state of inequalities and deepening inequalities that are bringing a lot of strain to our public services, and community organizations who are doing incredible work, but they are being expected to do more and more in these times with even fewer resources. So there is so much, kind of in also the mainstream media, but also social media that also really takes up our time about, kind of pushing back on, misinformation or any things that seem to fracture this kind of social cohesion and ideas about racial justice. So in this context, our work does become really important. And I wanted to say this, that we can't do this work without the support and the goodwill of our communities, with our partners that, we support and they support us in return, both at a national and a regional level, but more importantly at grassroots community level, where this work really makes a difference. So working together to promoting equality, advancing racial harmony, and fostering inclusion has become even more urgent in these times of uncertainty. And our role and commitment at Voice4Change stands firm. We are here to amplify those voices that sometimes, often are not heard, or to support communities to organize and thrive in and continue to build these bridges and the important work that we are doing, and collectively achieving the goals and the mission of our organization. But we also recognize these challenges. There is kind of great resilience, there's creativity, there's great leadership across our communities that we serve, and we want to sort of harness that and support each other in these times as well. And our responsibility to not just nurture that strength, but also to invest in it and be able to kind of work collectively in a more constructive manner, which our staff team is doing on a daily basis through the programs that we are running. And we'll hear a little bit more about that as we progress this evening. And today is really an opportunity, at least for me, and I speak on behalf of my board of trustees, that, to reflect on what we have achieved, the hard work that the staff all across Voice4Change have poured into to achieve our mission, our aims and objectives in the past year, recognizing, the strength, and, you'll be amazed to see the amount of work that has been put in into strengthening not just our networks, but also to be able to look ahead with greater clarity, but also with an ambition, for doing the right thing, which often seems to be a simple word, but actually can be a hard thing to achieve. So I think about all of these things here this evening as I open our annual general meeting. And I just want to start by thanking everybody, starting with the staff members at Voice4Change, our members, and our, collaborators, partners, everyone we associate with, to thank them for their continued support and also for collaborating with us in many positive ways. So I've kind of said something about, in reflection, looking back at the previous year. Before we move on to the next slide, I'd just like to invite my fellow trustees who are also here this evening, just so that the meeting knows who we all are. Can I invite Ela to say hello to the AGM? Has Ela joined us?
I think I saw her name.
Can I ask Carl in the meantime?
Sorry, I'm here. My mic was off. Oh.
Yes.
You got me, Ela.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry, my mic was on. I forgot about that. Off, I mean. And I'm Ela, and I'm a trustee for Voice4Change England, and I'm also the treasurer. So you'll hear a bit more from me later.
Thank you, Ela. Carl?
Hi, everyone. Great to see you on the call. I'm Carl, trustee of Voice4Change, representing God's own county in Yorkshire.
Thank you, Carl. We always love to hear this from Carl. And can I just add here that Carl and Ela have been the founding trustee members of Voice4Change, and we are still really delighted to have them with us. And without their support, I don't think we'd be here. So there's great support from Carl and Ela. Just acknowledging that from my behalf as chair of Voice4Change England. Next, I'd like to invite Aman.
Hi everyone, great to see you on the call. I'm Aman, And I don't think you'll be hearing very much from me, but I'll be here smiling.
Thank you, Aman, one of our newer board members as well at Voice for Change. And do we have Doreen Sangster?
No, I think she was running late.
Okay, so Doreen will be joining us soon. So thank you very much, my fellow colleagues. And I'll move on to the next slide, please, because we have a packed agenda today. As we can see, I've already done my introductions. I'll go on to the next slide, but as we can see, this is just a momentary kind of glimpse for audience here. This is what we'll be going through today, and I'll be calling out, colleagues as and when their turn comes up on the slides. It'll become obvious. So hopefully it's seamlessly running through the slides and the program, and already staff are, kind of doing the driving behind the scenes really well. So thank you very much. I'll move on to the next slide, which is trustee nominations, where I have an update. I also, before we go to trustee nominations, I'd just like to switch over to just have a look at the AGM minutes from the previous year, please, Shuki or Diti, if we can switch slides. So colleagues on the call, this is, it's important we do this. It's the minutes from last year's meeting, and if anybody present here who was attending the previous year's meeting as well, all we are doing is going through the minutes, which we can then approve at this meeting as an accurate record of the previous year's discussions. So if we can go through page 1. That's just the intros. That's, yep, welcome from, and we have our strategic aims going down on page 2. That's correct. Page 3. Our updates on various programs. Page 4. Overviews from our director and our deputy director's impact presentation. And then we had our guest speakers. And then page 6. And then rounding up, page 7. And thanking our funders. And then we had a Q&A that we picked up, and that's page 8, 7 and 8. Brilliant. So if I could ask anyone present at this meeting who was also present at last year's meeting, if they wouldn't mind raising their thumb or doing an emoji of some kind so we know, or writing in the chat. If colleagues are happy, I have 1 thumbs up, and if people are 2, so just we can kind of file this as an accurate record of last year's meeting. Thanks very much, colleagues, for doing that. Thank you, and we can switch back now, Viti or Shuki. Thank you. Great. So at this point in the AGM, I would just like to make an announcement that we did receive a nomination from a person who has sent us their details. I've been in touch with them, kind of talking about their interest, and this nomination is currently under consideration by the board, and we will get in touch with this person after the AGM. So that's currently under consideration. And similarly, if there's anyone on this call who wishes to, put themselves forward as a trustee or is interested in becoming a trustee, you can please contact myself or contact Voice for Change England and kind of send us your details. And I usually have a conversation with potential trustees and looking for the kinds of things that we would love to see on our board. So we have a wonderful set of colleagues currently, but we are always looking for newer kind of skills. And I can already shout out that fundraising is a big thing for any charitable organization at this time. So I'm just putting it out there. Okay, so I think that's it from me. If we can move on to the next slide, please. And I'll hand over now. Next, I'd like to invite my colleague, who's also our treasurer, Ela Chandavarkar to provide an overview of our finances. Ela, over to you.
Okay, well, this is going to be very quick, so please do come in with any questions you have. So could I have the next slide, please? Okay, this is our statement of financial activity, or SOFA. And it looks like the first thing I'd like to point out is if you look at the previous year, where we had 1.6 million, and you look at this year and it's 862,129, it looks like we've had a real drop in income, but actually that's not the case. In the last year, we hosted a social investment project, the Pathway Fund, which Kunle was one of the founder members along with 2 other people, and it's to improve social investment in the BME sector. So it wasn't really Voice4Change funding, but because we were hosting it, it was counted in our overall income. And in this year, 24-25, the Pathway Fund has set up as a legal entity in its own right, and we've been transferring the funds that we're still holding for them over to the company. So probably next year, you will see finance, which is just Voice4Change, if you don't host anything else in the meantime. So on the whole, the other thing I'd like to point out is that it always looks as though we spend more than we receive in particularly in restricted funds. But in actual fact, our financial year is April to March, and a lot of the grants we get are different financial years. For example, the National Lottery grant that we have is from August to July. So really, we have money that we carry forward, and we get more money for the project as it goes on. And as you can see, at the end of the day, we actually have 434,504 pounds that we carried forward, out of which 130,794 is unrestricted, and 303,710 is restricted money. The trustees do note that our unrestricted reserves are low. If you were at an AGM 2 years ago or 3 years ago, you would have seen that they were even lower. And I really have to commend the staff, Kunle and Shaman particularly, for all the effort they have put into raising more funding that's unrestricted. So we've got the trustees view this at their board meeting, every board meeting, and we look to see ways that we can use to actually increase the amount that we hold in unrestricted reserves. Could I have the next slide, please? Well, that's a very quick look at the balance sheet. So you can see that when we look at our assets, we add the money, the debtors who owe us money, and what we have in the bank, and we get a total. We then take away the people who owe us, the creditors, and we have a figure of net current assets. And if we add the fixed assets, it comes to that same figure that I showed you in the SOFA, and it balances with what we hold in unrestricted and restricted funds. That's it from me. Are there any questions? I'd like to thank all our funders, City Bridge Foundation, the School for Social Entrepreneurs, National Lottery, as I mentioned, the GLA, amongst others. And I'd like to thank them for their support. Shaman, you look like you're going to say something.
No, there are a lot of other funders, but I'll acknowledge them. Thanks.
Yes, there are a huge number of other funders, but I think what I was looking for was really the funders that made a big difference. Sorry, Comic Relief, because Comic Relief gave us a very important grant in this year to review our organization development, and I think that was of huge help, as well as helping us build quite significant partnerships. But I think Shaman would probably touch on this more in her presentation. So thank you.
Do we get approval at this stage, Ela?
Oh, I know. What I was going to say was I would like to ask the members to consider that at this stage, we normally appoint the auditor, but we do need to review and have a meeting with the auditor to go through exactly what we're getting. So I'd like to the membership here to approve that it's delegated to the board to appoint the auditor for the following year. And if anyone objects to that, if they can put that in the chat. I can't see any, so I assume that's approved then.
I'd like to propose that.
Okay.
I'll second that, sorry.
If that's, yeah. If I propose it and you second it, Carl, then we'll sort of go through that. Yeah.
I'd like to second
Okay.
that.
Lovely.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Ila,
Thank
for
you.
taking us through
Yeah.
our accounts and making a note about the auditor, reviewing the auditor, which will continue. So can I ask us to move on to the next slide, in which I'd like to invite Kunle Olulode, who's our director at Voice4Change England, to provide his overview. Kunle, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Nina. It's great to be in this 20th year of our existence. It's difficult sometimes when you're doing AGMs, which are retrospective, to look back on the period of time that's gone. So recently, when the urge is really to talk about what's happening in the here and now. But as has been indicated, I think there are some really important milestones that occurred in the year 24-25 that I'll touch on. And then with the kind of, as I say, one eye probably on the future, give an indication of some of the challenges that we still face. So if you could go into the slideshow, please. Okay, so one of the things that obviously we're very keen to extol is our role in strengthening a very fragile and under-resourced sector in supporting BME organizations to build better governance. And so Catalyst, our Catalyst program, which was led by Charmin, which she'll go into more detail in terms of the outcomes of that, is of central importance to the organization, both in terms of the London strand and the national strand of that program. And I think that the issues of enhancing community organizations and other BME-led charities to be able to scan the environment and decide on the right strategy to resolve barriers to development is really, really central. And so the Catalyst Year 2 program was one of the things that I think I would regard as one of the highlights of 24-25. Following on from that, I'd like to also commend our policy leads, Christabel and Jennifer, in particular, Jennifer, around the environmental strategy. In 24 and 25, we were just beginning to put the kind of final coat of paint on our strategy. And I think it's important in that the question of the environment and climate change is something that it seems that for BME communities in particular, we've either been excluded from the debate or we have self-excluded on quite an important topic, which forms a lot of the discussion in terms of our funders and foundations at the moment. And yet BME organizations, if I'm honest, are nowhere to be seen. So the work that Jennifer has done in this area, which began, I think, 2.5 years ago now, is now really beginning to gain traction, not just in the regions, but nationally. We're really excited by the work that's been developed with grassroots organizations on the climate issue. We're also really excited to announce 2 new strands in terms of this project that have been developed with equality partners Equally Ours. And as of last week, the NGO, the enterprise NGO Unlimited. And we're really excited by what we're going to be able to do further down the line in terms of developing this area of work. Then I'll move on to the issue of voter ID. I mean, I have more to say around civil society, which I'll touch on later. But again, the work with the GLA, which is, again, I think something that Charmin's team have really worked well in terms of developing. We've always had a hand in this area, particularly initially for several years, actually opposing the introduction of voter ID. But when it became law, we realized we had a responsibility to make sure that our communities were informed. We still have a lot of suspicions about the impact of introducing voter ID, and the data and statistics that are now available reflect the fact that it has had an impact in hindering voter engagement. And as Nina said, Voice4Change was set up to ensure the full engagement of Black and minoritized communities in every aspect of society. And so anything that sets up barriers that hinders that is a problem. And I think we're still, certainly the government and various agencies are still getting to grips with making sure that people are aware of the new processes around voting. Following on from that, I'd like to also commend Christabel, again, one of our policy arms, in her work on Home Truths, which was a document looking at initially Home Truths 1, the experience of Black and minoritized workers in the voluntary sector as regards racism and their experience of it. A document which I think still is being referenced in many parts of the third sector. But Home Truths 2, the follow-up to that report, was a program of work with Akivo designed to challenge and support mainstream UK civil society to take seriously the practical actions of pulling together anti-racism and race equity strategies. So over the course of a year, we worked with around 30 cohorts from quite major mainstream charitable organizations, looking at how they implemented equalities around race in their own organizations. The program itself, which ended in the autumn of 2025, was viewed as a huge success in terms of learning and set out to provoke ideas, I suppose, in some ways, to make changes in those organizations. And for those of you that are interested, there is a document which actually summarizes and follows up on some of the key elements of that program, which are available to you. The next area, contract readiness. One of the things that has held back, I think, a lot of our enterprise kind of organizations from developing is being able to get access to government contracts. Voice4Change, in partnership with the School for Social Entrepreneurs and Social Enterprise UK, pulled together a partnership program to develop pathways for organizations to learn about how best to pitch to central government, but also apart from training around getting, as we call, contract readiness, we also put on sessions to bring procurers together with suppliers, people who have control over contracts, to put them in the room with people who were looking to secure those contracts. We set ourselves as part of that program, it was run over 2 years in 24 and 25, a target of 250 organizations. When we carried out the evaluation, not only had we exceeded our target, we had doubled it. We actually addressed over 500 organizations, over 200 of which came from the BME communities. And in addition to that, we completed the program. We still had a waiting list of several hundred organizations. I'm really pleased to announce tonight that government is now considering, this new government is now considering a new program, and discussions are already underway between the 3 organizations to tender for that program. And we feel sufficiently confident and experienced enough in terms of both the evaluation of our program to put in a strong bid for what I think is going to be a really exciting piece of work and a great continuation of something that we've already started. So watch out for that one. So finally, in terms of highlights, I would say the Pathway Fund, which has already been touched on. Last year's AGM, of course, we had Asher Craig, the former Deputy Mayor of Bristol City Council, who is now the Chief Executive Officer of the Pathway Fund. And as Nina indicated and Ela indicated in her discussion of finances, Pathway Fund is now, we're breaking away from hosting that, and it's now an independent organization in its own right, with its own board, its own staff. And I think for me as one of the founders, I'd like to commend my own trustees for actually agreeing way back in 2014 for us to be able to pursue the development of this. I mean, Voice4Change can do a lot of things, but there's certain things we have limits on. We don't have hundreds of thousands of pounds to invest in organizations or to grant fund. That now is the job of Pathway. They have been armed with a £12 million dormant asset budget, which they will be distributing over the next 3 years. And I hope they'll be adding to that fund with a new endowment as well. And so those of you that are looking for those large investments and large grants will now have the opportunity to bid. And as I speak, their dormant assets fund is actually live. Specifically now, the regional pots, the first 3 regional pots are out there. That will be followed by another 3 to 4 regional pots next year, with £12 million behind it, backing for those organizations and people who are involved in enterprise in our communities to be able to pitch for. So for me, that's a kind of a good summary of, I think, some of the highlights of 24-25. Next slide, please. However, again, Nina touched on this in her introduction. Not everything is rosy in the garden. Civil society, we are set up as Voice4Change as a civil society organization. And we do a lot of work, as I say, to encourage the full participation of individuals from our communities in society. But what we are witnessing, and as I'm kind of speaking, I'm aware that there's a big by-election taking place tonight. And the question of the changing nature of our politics is very much to the fore. And we cannot deny that the old political establishment is actually, at this point in time, is dying on its feet. I was reading an article today, a writer was making the point that in the Makersfield by-election, the Tory party, who were formerly in government, actually do not even figure in the discourse or discussion around that by-election. Should Anthony Burnham, I assume, become the elected representative of that area, we are then going to see a challenge to our Prime Minister. Should he not win, and let's say, for example, Reform wins, we are likely then to see a sea change in terms of the calls for probably a new election. So it's a kind of seminal moment in the country's timeline. And I think maybe it's because of the World Cup, it's been overshadowed, but this is a really, really important day. It's not just our AGM, but for anybody who's online on this call, really needs to think through the implications of the time that we're moving on. There's more that I can say on this, but I'm going to leave it there. I think the other point is really the shift in focus in terms of the North-South divide. And many of our foundations, our networks, are now looking at place-based support rather than support that's based around, I suppose, the conventions of the charity sector. And I've often thought there's a tension between those areas of the third sector, which call on, I suppose, characteristics around race, gender, disability, and the commitment to actually making sure that those are fully resourced and supported, with the tension with regional-based support. And we are going through, it seems, one of those periods where clearly, again, from the government's perspective, it's important that money goes to the regions where they would see, I suppose, the South as having had it too good. But let's be also clear, at Voice for Change, we get it too from our members in the North, and they say the same thing. Our Black members, our brown members, they say that not enough is going on there in terms of the resourcing. So rather than just dismiss it as a kind of competition, I think we have got to get better. And I've been having touched on this with Charmin as well, understanding what are the needs of our brothers and sisters and our partner organizations in the regions. And we've got to be more efficient and more effective in supporting them. So next slide, please. So I'll just finish with some future perspectives. We are certainly in a period now where we are post-COVID and post-Black Lives Matter. The noise that generated and the changes that made in terms of policy for many institutions, both in the third sector, in the private sector, and in the mainstream media, that's over. We are, as is indicated, in a kind of pushback situation. And so for us, I suppose, as staff of Voice for Change, we also have to really consider new ways of actually thinking about our approach to infrastructure and capacity building. So one of the practical illustrations of that, and this, the theme of today's AGM is very much about partnerships, is in building a new partnership with a number of organizations who are looking to take on onward grant funding and infrastructure support through the lottery. So we've teamed up with the Lloyds Bank Foundation in a new partnership, as I say, with several other organizations to take on a pilot whereby we are being, I suppose, referred directly from the lottery to their organizations to us in terms of delivering infrastructure support. It's a 1-year pilot, which is going to end probably in the spring of 27. And with it is the potential that we could gain a significant slice of lottery resources to administer directly to organizations that are, as I say, are referred to them, but fingers crossed. And I know Charmin and I are both hoping that we are also will be able to refer organizations that come through our own networks directly. So, we're keeping our fingers crossed that that pilot is successful. Potentially it's worth as much as 150 million pounds. So it's a huge, potentially a huge project. So that's an example, as I say, of the new thinking and the way partnerships can work. Finally, again, referencing the current circumstances in which we're in, immigration and the more recent NOAC incident, and again referencing Makerfield, is going to be a major challenge, and we should not underestimate this time that we're going through. And I'll repeat that again and again. This could potentially have the same impact as the Macpherson report. It's that kind of scale. And I think on the immigration issue, we cannot, on the race equality side, simply trot out the same defensive arguments. We're going to have to think this through in a much more sophisticated manner. What would an immigration system designed by race equality organizations look like? I'm going to throw that challenge out to you. That's something to think about. But I think in general, while people are talking about two-tier levels of justice, we should also remind them that when we look at data like stop and search, when we look at outcomes in terms of treatments elsewhere in the legal system, when we look at what's happening in employment and recruitment, there's still a serious problem with discrimination in our society. And no amount of discussion about two-tier levels of justice is going to eradicate that until we actually come up with something better. That's not to say that all the DEI or equalities work is great. Some of it, I'll be honest and candid with you, has been appalling. But then it's on us to actually make that better and not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kunle. There's much to think about there, and especially for all of us thinking about the challenge on devising an immigration system that is actually thoughtful and co-created with race equity organizations. Well, let's see. It's a really interesting thought. Can I now invite Dr. Sharmin Shahjahan, who is our Deputy Director at Voice4Change. She'll be taking us through a really exciting impact and achievements side of Voice4Change, but also we'll talk about some recent work that we've just finished. And Sharmin, over to you now.
Thank you, Nina. Shiki, next slide, please. Hello, everyone. Everybody should know what Voice4Change England is, but if there are new members, just for your benefit, we are a national race equality charity and an advocate for Black and minoritized ethnic voluntary, community and social enterprise sector. And our main aim is to build a stronger and more inclusive civil society and basically to end race discrimination and address the root cause of inequalities using research, policy, advocacy, influence, because without those, representation alone is not enough. We need to advocate, but also we need to influence. So power is also really important. So not just representation alone. Next slide, please. Voice4Change England is a national membership organisation, and our membership is totally free. We are trying to remove barriers to, structural barriers, and our members. Membership is open for everyone, and there are two main categories of our membership: organisational membership and individual membership. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But within the organisation, we have organisational infrastructure support that we offer to our members and our beneficiaries, our stakeholders, and Kunle referred to a lot of policy work, research and advocacy and influence work that we do. But we also last year has been really significant in developing our systems change work, addressing the root causes of inequalities in health, housing, environment and education, basically the social or the wider determinants of health. And under each of these work streams, you can see what we do in terms of our infrastructure support work, capacity building workshops, tailored and bespoke one-to-one support to organizations, and also access to our online resource hub. Kunle talked about the environmental strategy, but we also have lots of toolkits, policy briefs, and blog posts on our website. And none of this work would have been possible without our communications and marketing team. So Diti, Priya, Shuki, Jess, and Emily have been behind the scenes work to make our website updated, our social media presence. So I'd like to thank them, our comms team, for all their hard work behind the scenes. But we are doing also a lot of campaigns on topical issues. So for example, Kunle mentioned GLA, voter ID campaign and democratic participation campaign. We've finished 3 phases of that and quite successfully. And currently we're running our hate crime prevention campaign, hate crime awareness campaign. But we can't do this work in silo. We are working in partnership with other organizations. We have contract work, commission work, and also Voice4Change England, especially Kunle and we represent Voice4Change England externally to in various other boards and steering groups. Next slide, please, Shuki, thanks. So our membership has got lots of perks. It's absolutely free, there's no catch, and there are exclusive benefits. So if you're not a member yet and you just came to see our AGM, I would recommend that you become a member. You can scan the QR code and become a member. Everyone, individuals and organizations, can become our member. And monthly newsletter with lots of sector insights and funding opportunity information you'll get every month in your inbox. Next slide, please. So Kunle talked about our Catalyst program. That is our infrastructure and development program. And you can see in terms of our impact, we've reached over 1,000 people and over 600 BME organizations in England with our capacity building support. And some of the feedback, as you can see, that everything was helpful and easy to understand, good pace for the time, not excessive content and or talking, lots of practical activities. And these feedback, we take it very seriously. At the end of every workshop, we collect feedback, and we're constantly improving ourselves, our support to our sector. And you can see the stats, they're quite high in terms of the workshop was useful, 100% agreed, enhanced knowledge, understanding, and or skills, and 97% agreed that the workshop was relevant to their needs. We do have a needs assessment framework and an asset-based community development assessment framework when we provide one-to-one tailored support. In terms of, what they felt after attending the workshops, 95% felt that they felt better equipped after the session, and 90% said they would recommend the workshops to other people. Next slide, please. In terms of our one-to-one support, we've supported 160 organizations with tailored one-to-one consultancy support, as you can see from the feedback. And these are, my gratitude and thanks to my team, all the infrastructure and development team members, Sarah, Sophia, Yana, and Bola. They cover across the 9 regions of England. And you can see from the feedback that how they helped and supported organizations. And the support was really helpful and helped me to learn more about how to implement a fundraising strategy. And the difference we're making at that level is that regular check-in and guidance from hands-on. So we have a very relationship building approach, not just, one-off. So for each organization, we tailor-make that support, and that's evident in the feedback and the percentages that you can see. Next slide, please, Shiki. Ela mentioned about Comic Relief Global Majority Grant that helped us as an organization to develop our own internal infrastructure, but also we distributed grants. And with that grant, we've successfully built relationships with 7 organizations in 5 regions outside of London. And that really helped this organization because we kept it flexible. And that had a significant and transformative impact on the funded organizations, as you can see from some of the quotes. For example, the Race Equality Centre said the funding allowed us to invest in people and systems, which has fundamentally changed how we are able to influence policy and support our communities. Cambridge Ethnic Community Forum said Having flexible funding and trusted support gave us the space to listen properly to our communities and build solutions together. And that's so important to understand the needs of the community and, finding and identifying solutions together. The co-design element of our work is really important. Next slide, please. Since last year, we've developed our Horizons London program. I touched on it, and we are looking at this very holistically, health and the wider determinants of health, including housing, education, and environment. And I'd like to thank my colleagues, Christabel and Jennifer, leading on this work. And I come from public health and health inequalities background, so I've been leading on the health aspect of the practical aspect of the program. Please, can I have the next slide, please? And you can see some of the health impact reports. It's on our website. We are working very closely with London Bangladesh Health Partnership, and our colleague, one of our keynote speakers, Riyadul Karim, will talk a bit more about that. And this partnership is hosted currently within Bangla Housing Association, that we are also collaborating very closely. But one of the impact has been, as you can see, the first report was co-producing diabetes care solutions with the Bangladeshi community in Tower Hamlets and Newham. Following that was funded by North East London Integrated Care Board, and following on that from all the recommendations on how to implement some of those, we presented to Public Health, we presented to Bart's NHS Health Trust, we presented to various boards the findings, and people are really receptive, even to primary care, and take away some of the recommendations to look at it closely and to implement and action those recommendations. In terms of the HPV and cervical cancer screening awareness among Bangladeshi women last year, I come from Bangladesh, and it was eye-opening for me when I was doing this workshop that no one has heard about HPV, and they thought it's a new virus. So you can understand just an implication, the barrier and access to information and awareness, it's so basic level we need to start. Following on from that, North East London Cancer Alliance funded that. And they have now funded, and I'm very happy to say, in this International Women's Day, the week, we have launched Bangladeshi Women's Health Forum, London Bangladeshi Women's Health Partnership. And that is recruiting volunteers from 7 to 8 boroughs in London and training them up. And Voice4Change England is involved in capacity building and facilitating and supporting. We are holding health melas. And the next report, as you can see, we have proved how to engage with community, and also the right way of engagement, taking services out to the community through these health fairs really works. And you can see some of the methods of engagement that is so effective with certain communities. And that's where our tailored approach to engagement and co-designing solutions with system stakeholders really takes shape. Next slide, please. As you can see, housing issues affecting Londoners from the Horizons London program, but all the issues around it are all social determinants of health. So each is interconnected to another. So addressing just housing, will not impact if you're being discriminated, or if you don't have a job, or you have poor quality homes. If you have a roof over your head, but the quality is poor, if there are lack of green spaces around you, if it's overcrowded. So all of these elements need to be addressed, and targeted support needs to be there. And disproportionately, BME communities are impacted negatively. And COVID-19 pandemic has shown us and magnified those pre-existing health inequalities in some communities. Next slide, please. So on our website, part of the Horizons London program, there's a housing toolkit. Kunle talked about our environmental strategy, and also there's a talking climate toolkit. So feel free to access them. And if any of my colleagues can put the link in the chat, that would be great. Thanks. Next slide, please, Shiki. And Esme Fairbairn has funded a 3-year project, which Jennifer's leading on, and it centers the voices of Black and minoritized and marginalized communities in the fight for a fair future. And you can see from her sessions, climate sessions, some of the feedback are really positive, because I think, as I mentioned, lack of, awareness, it's really important. Lack of engagement, it's a barrier to even talk about climate justice. So some of those, quotes, I was really kind of, heartwarming to hear some of the, for example, now we're seeing new forms of collective action, challenging urban developments, how we can link and support each other. And then those are the kind of things, and how young people can engage with climate issues and the strategies for change. It's really important. And as an organization, since phase 2 of our GLA campaign, we have targeted campaign for engaging with young people. We've opened up a TikTok account for that social media campaign. So we are constantly trying to find ways to reach to audiences that we need to reach in order to make them aware of all the issues that are impacting our sector. Next slide, please. Kunle touched on this about Home Truths 2, and this is the QR code and the work that Christabel has done with Kivo and Home Truths 2 program. There is an anti-racism companion journal. You can download it, and it's totally free. And it offers some quiet space for you to reflect on each of the themes in this journal, and how you might spark some powerful action in your institutional settings. So please have a look if you haven't. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, with protection approaches, we're currently running hate crime awareness campaign, and this is just a QR code. We're towards the tail end of our campaign, actually, but it's really important in the light of the hostile political environment and all the things that are happening, that this doesn't go cold, and it's a topical issue, and we need to address and make communities aware what happens what's the difference between hate crime and hate incident, how to report it, what's the role of bystander, how can anyone intervene safely. So we're providing all of that either online or in-person workshop currently. Next slide, please. So these are just facts and figures. Kunle mentioned all the programs: Catalyst London, Catalyst Regions, contract readiness, climate justice work, and hate crime prevention workshops. If I can go to the next slide, please, because I'm interested in the total number. And all the GLA phases, Horizons London programme, Sport England, and other non-funded programs that we have done in terms of piloting AI-based workshops. The total number I'm interested in, you can see how many people, over 3,000 people we've reached. And it's really, this couldn't have been done without the wonderful team members at Voice4Change England, but also our really important stakeholders, our partner organizations that we work with. Next slide, please. These are some of the social media stats. As I mentioned, we used to have, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. We also have X, Twitter, but we had to open a TikTok account recently because we want to engage with our younger audience. Next slide, please. So this is hot from the press. It's not launched yet, but we will be launching this soon. And I'd like to thank everybody who participated for this bit of work. It's a sector mapping report, and we called it Built on Trust, Stuffed of Resources. So next slide, please. I'll just give you some headline figures. So this report brings together reflections of 300 plus organizations across England, and this provides infrastructure insights about how our strategic partners, point of views, our BME-led organizations, and also local and regional challenges and success, and in terms of practical recommendations for funders in the sector. So this is an important report. I think it would inform, some of the findings. It echoes with some of the other findings of our other stakeholders who've done, but some of them are really, really targeted for BME VCSEs. Next slide, please. So there is a capability and asset paradox we found in the report findings, that organizations, who undertook a self-assessment feeling that there is a 42-point gap that exists between what the sector knows and what it owns. As you can see, our BME VCSE sector, they have the expertise, cultural competence, language skills, and community trust, but they lack premises, reserves, IT, core funding. And this is, a situation that is across England we've found. Next slide, please. And the participation of power disparity, we talked about this earlier, that in terms of engagement in advocacy, there's high engagement, but it does not really necessarily lead to influencing strategic decisions due to institutional resistance and performative tokenism. So even we are sitting at the table, but it doesn't necessarily mean we can influence those their decisions. So as I mentioned earlier, representation alone is not enough. We need to have representation with influencing power. And this is something that as a sector, BME VCSE sector, we are experiencing, and it's really apparent from this findings. Can I go to the next one, please? Thanks. And also there's a support mismatch. 82% have said that they would like more culturally competent by and for shared services. And they rated generic infrastructure support as moderately useful. They are useful, but you need to think that they are also stretched. Everybody's stretched to their max. There's capacity issues at every level. All our stakeholders we're working with, other national and regional organizations we're working with, they're all overstretched. So, this is something that we need to work collaboratively to address some of these gaps. So next slide, please. And this is an interesting question, and other reports that are on infrastructure, I haven't come across this percentage or this question, but we've asked them about AI tools being used in the sector. And 52% of the organizations are actively using AI tools. And this is not, this is just to offset chronic capacity constraints that they have and HR shortages. So that, constantly, people are running and doing multiple roles and multitasking, and they're approaching, and using AI tools. And that's why we've done some pilot workshops on AI use in fundraising, in project management, in communicating and marketing. So our beneficiaries, our BME VCSE sector, they're aware of how to use AI ethically, and be aware of not just, go with the hype, but be aware of some of the, other hindrance, or I would say disadvantages of using AI as well. So with caution to use AI. Next slide, please. And these are some of the quotes that we have seen from some of the organizations that we've spoken with, and because we had a series of focus groups, one-to-one interviews, but also survey. And you can see that, these quotations that show the significant challenges around community premises, so physical assets. And it's been, as you can see, that local authorities, they're worried about the finances, and they have been the community assets are being taken out of the community. And this really is something that, as a race equity organization, for a BME VCSE sector, we need to think, because if community assets are disappearing, then what could we do as a sector to support, to have community assets within the community? In terms of everything is short-term, that boom-bust model of funding, And, you know, as soon as the project ends, job security issues arise. And, you know, we need to think kind of strategically how we can align ourselves. When I say ourselves, not just Voice for Change England, I mean the whole sector, as well as our allies, other national organizations and regional organizations, how we, instead of competing, how we can collaborate. So moving away from competition, moving towards collaboration, so we can sustain something, the good work that we're all doing for the longer term. Next slide, please. As well as local infrastructure, and I mentioned this because they're also stretched. They also have capacity issues. And really the in-depth support that Voice for Change England has specialized on, it's something that, you know, they need. The need is there, the demand is there, but local infrastructure organizations may not have the capacity to support them. And that's the reality. Really, we want to, you know, work with other organizations, and I'm glad Maddie is here today. We've worked with NAFCA in one of the regions as their equity-led partner, and really, it's really heartwarming to see other national organizations, you know, collaborating with Voice for Change England to. We all have the same aim at the end of the day. We want our VCC sector to thrive and sustain. So how we do that with an equity lens and supporting all sections of the community, that's the bit that, you know, Voice for Change England brings our specialist approach, that how we engage with communities, how we can build that relationship and trusting relationship within a very short space of time, because we know the needs, we know the worries, we're hearing them every day. And these codes are just, you know, shows that all the gaps and the needs and the demand that are in existence. And the system, you know, had to be changed, or the system, we have some system allies here in this room that they need to have an open mind about, you know, making those changes. We provide data, evidence, lived experience. What could be more important? You know, data, stats alone, but, you know, if you pair that with lived experience, policy shifts, you know, if you see some of the policy shifts, it should be taken not just quantitative data, but also lived experience into account, because people on the ground are suffering. So we need to work together to address some of these points. And there, you know, funders are also stretched. Their own internal priorities are changing, and our sector is being impacted by external forces. So there are lots of changes that are happening that's beyond our control. But what we can do together is stand in solidarity and work together to address some of those common threats and challenges. Next slide, please. So, you know, I've mentioned this loss of community anchors, the critical risk factors, infrastructure is fragile in some parts, and there are restricted funding traps. And if it's project-based funding, then where's the scope for strengthening and the, you know, infrastructure of the organization? And workforce burnout, that is real. Workforce burnout is really real in our sector, and we need to address this one as well, because if the workforce is burnt out, who's going to do the work? So next slide, please. And recommendations for funder: more co-funding, more equity focus, and co-design. These are really fundamentals that all funders should focus on. And some funders are really spearheading. For example, I would say Comic Relief, the Global Majority Fund has done. It's really helped organizations to build their own development infrastructure, as well as supporting other organizations and, you know, the onward grant distribution. So that those are the kind of things we need, and not for a year or two. We need longer term funding. We have the Horizons London program. Systems change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes real relationship building and partnership, you know, building, so systems can be shifted internally. We need to identify the system allies and work closely with them to make these changes. But yes, these are some of the core things that we need to, have liaison with our funders to talk about that. How can we make this funding more, approachable and sustainable? So it's not that boom bust cycle of funding model we have. Next slide, please, Shuki. Thanks. And other recommendations for other infrastructure organizations, for regional hubs to have culturally competent and back office functions to reduce the administrative burden on grassroots leaders. And this comes from, if you read the full report, this is just a snapshot, that a lot of smaller to mid-sized organizations are really struggling because they need that HR specialist advice and support. They need kind of accountancy and financial management support. They're so busy delivering projects on the ground. They don't have those other mechanisms to do their own infrastructure building within the organization. So some organizations are really, struggling. And in terms of scaling support, consultancy for mid-sized organizations transitioning to complex phases such as property ownership or earned income. So currently we're working with a School for Social Entrepreneurs on their Trading for Good program and a few other work that we're doing. And that is looking at people's Trading for Good in a nutshell is if there is a grant, but also it encourages social enterprises and community businesses to, if you make a £1 profit, they will support by with a grant of £1. So, but along with all the learning support that comes with it. So we're working with SSE quite a lot on a few of those projects. Next slide, please. And in terms of policymakers and regional authorities, as I mentioned, that, having strategic seats at this table and moving beyond that consultative engagement by establishing permanent and voting seats for BME-led infrastructure at strategic boards. And this is the thing that I think is missing at the moment. A lot of representation happens, but how much influencing happens? How are our system allies listening? Are our funders listening to what we're saying? How much has been, where's the accountability when we're saying this? That they have done and followed through. So that accountability is really important. So the transition from equity awareness to accountability with measurable audited improvements in sector stability. And that's the difference that would make. And then hopefully policymakers and regional authorities, after we publish this and launch this report, we'll hold sessions about this, how we can take it forward. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we'll be publishing this soon and with the full findings. So keep an eye out. It would be on our website. Next slide, please. Are there any questions? I've been talking for a long time. So Nina, we can take questions at the end, or I know we have two guest speakers waiting.
There are a couple of questions, I suppose, in the chat, and I suggested that we can take them together. So, we've just heard a very rich set of slides, some work that has been ongoing. If there are any specific questions right at this moment for Sharmin, if colleagues on the chat, if you wish to unmute yourself to ask a very specific question, you may do so now. Otherwise, I'm going to move us on. Yeah. Okay. So maybe we can start thinking as we absorb, the extent of the work, but hopefully with our two guest speakers this evening, as they speak, perhaps colleagues might want to frame a question that links and combines some of these things that both Kunle and Sharmin have already mentioned as either challenges or as solutions or more kind of collaborative work moving forward. Is that okay? So thank you so much, Sharmin, for that really excellent overview of a snapshot of the work done through the, our regular kind of programs, but also at the end for that very specific work that you have done and kind of highlighting I was struck by the capability and asset paradox, as well as the participation and power disparities still looming large there, and many other kind of interesting statistics in between. So thank you very much to the team for, this is my first glance, by the way, just telling the meeting here today. So thank you very much, and for all this work. And I'll move us on, please, to the next slide, where I'd like to invite our next keynote speaker. And it's my pleasure this evening to invite Riyadul Karim, who is Assistant Director of Community Engagement and also Vaccine and Screening Equity in NHS England for the London region. So, Mr. Karim, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nina. Can you hear me okay, colleagues? Yep. Okay, thanks. That's great. It's good evening, everybody. It's a real honor to be invited at the AGM of Voice4Change England, particularly in this important year as you mark 20 years since your founding. And I want to begin by thanking the team at Voice4Change England, particularly Dr. Sharmin Shahjahan, for the kind invitation. Sharmin and Voice4Change England, for me, have been key partners over many years. And they've not only supported the work that I do, but they've also helped shape the way I think and others think about partnership, equity, community leadership, and system change. And dare I say it, building sustainability in the VCSE sector. Your anniversary is more than just a milestone. It's an opportunity to reflect on the role Voice4Change plays in strengthening the Black and minoritized voluntary and community sector, amplifying community voice, challenging systems to think and act differently. And I'd like to think that I've been influenced very much by that, and building partnerships and in alliances needed to advance equity. And the whole slide deck that Sharmin just showed and the framing that Kunle provided just gives us so much insights for us to think at system level. So for me, everything begins with the capital T word, trust. We often think that trust in public services, it's something that communities should be just simply giving. But for many communities, especially those who have experienced exclusion, discrimination, poor access, or services that have not always listened, trust can't be assumed. It's got to be earned. Just like all friendships, you have to earn friendships. You have to reciprocate. You have to build trust. And it has to be patient. You have to be respectful and consistent. Can't be pushy, can't stigmatize. It has to be built through that capital R word, relationships. And lip service won't work. It's real service, active service. Most importantly, it has to recognize communities as not just passive recipients of services, but active partners in their own health, well-being, and future. And in a diverse city like London and many of our metropolitan cities, we have to reflect upon the contribution and recognize contribution of our minoritized ethnic groups in our NHS workforce. So not only are they serving our NHS with all of this rainbow coalition of people, of different races, etc., but at the same time, they are members of those same underserved, and note I say underserved rather than hard to reach communities. Now, my pan-London role, or should I say London role, NHS England, has focused on building partnerships between communities, the voluntary community sector, local authorities, NHS, and wider systems. So as you could see, it was quite a long title, but effectively what I'm trying to say is that I bring people together. The aim is simple. It's significant to improve access, confidence, participation in vaccination, immunization, screening and prevention, and wider health services among the communities that have far too often been underserved. And that work has never been just about messaging. It's been about bringing, as I said, people together through trusted relationships, working alongside communities so they can shape the solutions that improve their health, well-being, and future. It's about building trust, and it's about understanding our communities holistically, and allyship, so important. Many of the lessons that continue to guide my work were shaped by the pandemic. And during the COVID response in Enfield, where I was assistant director of primary care, I was working at a place level with the NHS, local authority partners, and we were working closely with the Revival Christian Church of Enfield, a Black African and Black Caribbean heritage church, a Pentecostal church, that and we're trying to facilitate open and honest conversations about vaccination, health, and trust. This was a very humbling experience for me because it wasn't a top-down campaign. There weren't any formal lectures. There were town hall breakfast conversations held in a trusted place, opened by a trusted leader, Dr. Nick Chanda, pastor, and supported by trusted medical and nursing voices who could listen and respond and speak with clinical credibility, cultural understanding and awareness, and faith sensitivity and respect to that. I learned very quickly that one size does not fit all. And this is what Sedi Fredericks, who's now, it was the former Kenton Medway ICB chair, and at the time, North Mid's chief chair at the time, said that what you're doing, Riyad, is 3 T's. It's trusted leaders, trusted places, and trusted voices. So I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but it's important for someone in the NHS to tell you that we understand this, and this is not just mirror signal maneuver. Trusted leaders are people who hold that credibility and influence in communities through lived experience, faith, culture, advocacy, community leadership, or relational trust. There will be faith leaders, VCSE leaders, community advocates, and people who can bridge communities and systems, create that dialogue and that confidence, and translate local concerns in culturally grounded ways. Trusted places, you bet, they're the familiar places that you feel safe, respected and connected. And during the pandemic, when the vaccination campaign happened, where do we do it? We did it where people are, in masjids, in temples, in mandirs, in churches, in synagogues, in community centers, in women's groups, and in formal community spaces. The value is not just a venue. It's a place of belonging, shared identity, and trust. And making healthcare engagement is more accessible and community-centered. Where I was brought up in a mining village in Derbyshire, the miners' welfare would be very important places. These are trusted places, just as it pains me to say Mansfield Football Town is as well, even though I'm a Nottingham Forest supporter. I had to put that in there. Trusted voices are credible people, and they're culturally attuned messengers who can, their communication resonates because it's authentic and relatable, it's responsive to the community realities, and they're peer champions, they're faith representatives, but they will probably be doctors and lawyers. So if that's right, doctors, lawyers, local people who are of that faith or that community, but they're of professional standing. And it's also those trusted community channels like the faith networks, Premier Gospel, Channel S for Bangladeshi communities, and other, the Bangla Press Club, etc., family networks, WhatsApp groups, ethnic media, community languages, and grassroots organizations. The role is to move health messaging beyond generic information that's co-produced, and let's face it, that looks static, but into now culturally meaningful and tailored engagement. And I feel that in London, you're now seeing more of this. Together, the 3 T's provides a practical framework for moving away from generic outreach to a more culturally intelligent, community-centered partnership. And I'm learning from international centers of heritage, like, working with the Romanian government and working with we've worked with the Bangladeshi High Commission before, because many of our communities are diaspora communities. And so it's really important. We are literally a heartbeat away from Abuja, Dhaka, Islamabad, and New Delhi. And it's really important to recognize how we can tap into those areas and trusted channels. So this is why your role in Voice4Change is important. You've understood very clearly that community voice is not an optional extra. It's not a nice to have. I've learned from Charmin and the team and from Diti and so many others. Same thing I'm learning from them all the time. Every interaction counts. This is central to equity, community voice. It's central to better policy. It's central to better services, and it's central to trust. And Charmin, I hope you don't feel too uncomfortable. You've seen this work from my place-based engagement in primary care in Enfield, through to the Pan-London work that we've done with Black, Asian, minority communities. Charmin has seen how the 3 T's has moved, and she's been an active, she's talked up about it when others haven't for whatever reason. I'm not into kind of fame or vanity. Charmin knows that. She knows that I want to make a difference. And I'm grateful for people like that who will put these things forward, give us an opportunity to speak about it. So it's moving practice from the pandemic into a wider approach for engaging underserved communities across London. And as I said before, this can be replayed in Clacton, in Blackpool, and in Mansfield and Ashfield. This can help build a national narrative of building trust. Trusted leaders, trusted voices, trusted faces. The pandemic, let's face it, it really brought us into sharp focus. It's something that changed. An Assistant Director of Primary Care, Professor Kevin Fenton's disparity reports from Public Health England at the time activated me. The Black Lives Matter issues activated me. And it highlighted that COVID did not create these inequalities, but it exposed them, intensified them, and made it impossible for us as a society to ignore. Black and Asian minority ethnic communities were disproportionately affected. The Bangladeshi community in particular experienced significant impact. Underlying health conditions, deprivation, housing, employment patterns, language barriers, structured inequality, and long gaps in access and trust. At the time, I was inspired by a pan-London Bangladeshi webinar convened by the then leader of Camden Council. I think it was Georgia Gould at the time, and she was chairing London councils. And she brought together community leaders, public health voices, system partners to discuss vaccination and communities' concerns. I thought about connecting with other stakeholders and bridge builders across the NHS and public health, and that became the foundation of the London Bangladeshi Health Partnership. And I co-founded that with my dear colleague, Dr. Sharmin Shah Jahan, key partners, Khasruzzaman from Barts Health, who's on the call, I salute you as well, and Bashiruddin from Bangla Housing, and our various allies. And from the outset, the partnership that, your theme today about partnership is what I've picked up, and it's a key heart of the work. I'm learning every day. I'm not the finished article by no means. London Bangladeshi Health Partnership was created because British Bangladeshi communities faced some of the highest rates of long-term conditions, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, poor health in England. And these challenges were compounded by these language barriers, low institutional trust, underrepresentation, service design, and also underrepresentation in leadership roles in the NHS, local authorities, civil service, and mainstream engagement that often fails to reach communities in meaningful ways. The purpose of LBHP, London Bangladeshi Health Partnership, has been to champion health equity by addressing community needs, reducing inequalities, and improving access to service to British Bangladeshi through that 3T model. The initial funding and project management support came from NHS England's Legacy Health Equity Partnership and Leonora Wheel and Janine La Rosa. LBHP convened its first Health Inequality Summit, probably the first inequality summit looking at London's 322,000 Bangladeshis in September 2024. That summit included a keynote address from Professor Kevin Fenton, support from the Director of Public Health in Tower Hamlets, alongside NHS England London colleagues, public health partners, and community organisations, Barts Health, Bangla Housing, Diabetes UK, and of course, who could I forget, Voice4Change England. That event mattered because it brought people together around a single campaign and a shared commitment to equity. It demonstrated what can happen when you get community insight, public health expertise, NHS leadership, and that VCSE partnership and insight that Voice4Change brings. In short, it's all about bringing people together. So that bridge between the community and system, what I've become now, and many of us are system advocates to the community and vice versa. That bridge is essential. There's many of us, if not thousands, of second and third generation and even first generation people from underserved communities in leadership roles who are working in system roles, and we can make a difference. We need to mobilize ourselves and pay forward, because too often communities are engaged in decisions after they're made. So we need to, the community, too often the voluntary and community sector is asked to deliver, but not always invited to shape. Too often lived experience is heard, but it's not acted upon. True partnership means going beyond consultation. It means co-design, as Sharmin said. It means shared ownership, co-production. It means recognizing the expertise of communities and community organizations as equal to professional institutional expertise. So what we've done now in London, we've got the development of vaccination and screening groups for those underserved communities. And these are now evolving into community health equity, because communities are not shaped by whether or not they take vaccinations or uptake of free cancer screening, but it's about understanding health in a wider sense and building that trust. These forums knit and stitch NHS and local authority and voluntary community organizations, clinicians, and people with lived experience to address inequalities in vaccination prevention. And who's helping advise us at the Health Equity Prevention across London? Charmin and Voice4Change England, because we want to build sustainability. We want to get advice to our hyperlocal VCSE partners, because we know there's finite resources, but you always remember the people that helped you in difficulties and also got you on your feet. We've got to lift as we climb. So the purpose is not just to improve communication. That matters, doesn't it? But it's also to improve cultural accessibility. And that means asking whether services are easy to understand, easy to reach, and respectful of cultural realities. It means asking whether the information is available in the right languages, whether the community concerns have been taken seriously, and whether services are visible in trusted spaces, and whether communities can influence how services are designed and delivered. It's not just about multilingual leaflets, although that's important. But we should have done that 20 years ago. We're doing it. We're catching up. We have seen the approach through these partnerships with a wide range of communities: Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Indian, Sikh, Somali, Black African, Black Caribbean, Polish, Romanian, Brazilian, and Portuguese. What a lovely diversity London is. Gypsy, Roma, and traveller communities, so important. It is GRT History Month this month. The London Bangladesh Health Partnership has helped fostered that development of that London-wide partnership. But as I said, without Voice4Change, we wouldn't be where we are. The reports that they have done through our delivery organization, Bangla Housing, getting the people in, and then in terms of Voice4Change, providing that insight and locking in high quality reports that are now leveling that gap in service equity, I cannot, on behalf of London and all our communities, we salute you. The Romanian Health Roundtable has brought community, academic, local authority, and NHS partners together to focus on prevention and trust, and that has led to an Romanian Health Equity Forum. And that wouldn't have happened had we not had a London Bangladesh Health Partnership. So the London Romani, Gypsy, and Irish, Scottish, and Welsh Travellers Health Equity Forum is part of this wider movement of community-centred health equity. We're also working with Black majority church leaders London-wide, thanks to that initial spark lit by Pastor Nick Chanda and Enfield. We're now working through the Redeem Network, which has over 200,000 congregants and 600 churches, let alone in London, I think 2,000 nationally. From Enfield to Ilford in Seven Kings, from Palm Sunday, we had a Faith and Sunday service. We then moved that to Ilford on Easter Monday, and we've also tested this way of working innovatively, faith-centered in Chesterfield as well. And we've got those trusted doctors and medics and nurses working alongside us. So grateful for this service. So these are examples that are different in their community focus. They share a common principle. Change happens when systems work through trusted community partners from the beginning. Now, I know I've talked a lot, and forgive me, I talk for England. I will try to do as best I can and score a few goals like we did last night. This brings me back to Voice4Change England. 20 years you stood for voice, representation, equity, sector leadership. You've created a space for Black and minority organizations to be heard, supported, and connected. You've challenged systems to recognize the value, depth, and legitimacy of the sector. And that's rubbed off on me and many of my colleagues and even my operational director in NHS London. That work is as important as it ever has been. We stand at a critical point. The challenges are significant. And Kunle talked about that, and you've referenced that. Many community organizations are facing financial pressure. Short-term funding does not help. Rising demand, workforce strain that Shami mentioned, and the ongoing burden of responding to inequalities. At the same time, we all know it's a tough environment. Public systems are facing significant pressure, waiting lists, workforce challenges, budget constraints, widening inequalities. But there is always a risk that partnership becomes transactional, a grant, a project, a delivery contract, a consultation exercise. So we've got to have something deeper and more meaningful. And that requires collaborative leadership. It means recognizing that no single institution, like the NHS, however large, can solve the inequalities alone. And now that's not just like a get out of jail card. I mean, in the sense that we need to be more collaborative, and we have to. I mean, there won't be an NHS England after 1st of April 2027. We need to work and foster that relationship to ensure that the ICB, the sole strategic commissioner, works in a way which is so connected to the VCSE sector. We need to ensure and influence that neighborhood health is not just another medicalized model, but it is integrated and woven into the fabric of the communities. So it means that communities are not hard to reach, systems are hard to trust. It means valuing that the VCSE sector not only as a delivery partner, but a strategic partner, an intelligence partner, an accountability partner. And it also means that we've got to be honest, how do we build relationships and partnerships? So who shapes the agenda? Who defines the priorities? And who informs the insight of this work? Who is invited into the room early enough to influence the direction? You've all been in a situation before where you're brought in to rubber stamp something for communities. We can't do that. That's not meaningful. That's not credible. Who else have we got to reach? If we're really serious about equity, these are the questions that we all have to keep asking. Looking ahead, I see several opportunities for collaborative work in the next 20 years. You're celebrating your 20 years, but here's to the next 20, right? First, we need to embed trust building as a core infrastructure, not just a short-term response to crisis. This needs to be embedded with the ICB as a sole strategic commissioner and joint working with councils and VCSE organizations I mentioned. During the pandemic, we learned quickly that trusted community relationships were essential, but that learning can't be lost. Trust cannot be switched on and off during emergencies. It's got to be invested before the crisis arises. Shouldn't just have money for resilience. We need money and funding strategically placed to kind of work with communities downstream and upstream. Second, we need to move away from engagement to shared design. Communities have to be involved upstream in shaping the priorities, designing services, interpreting data, and evaluating impact. Third, we need to strengthen our community-led evidence. I'd like to think I'm an innovative commissioner and a bridge builder, but I need air cover so that I can keep on doing this innovation and trust-laden work. Because I say, okay, you've done this, well, how many vaccines have you had? But it doesn't work like that. We've got to build the trust holistically. So therefore, we need that qualitative insight and that lived experience. That the VCSE sector are sitting on that gold-plated assets. And you know that these are not anecdotal extras. They're vital forms of intelligence, and they help systems understand what the quantitative data cannot alone show. And fourth, we need to support the sustainability of Black and minority voluntary community organizations. And we also need to support the development of more white working class community organizations so that they build sustainability. And we need to be kind of twinning between Doncaster and Derby and Scunthorpe and Surrey. Forgive me if that sounded political. It's not. It just means that we need to have a national narrative. If these organizations are essential to reducing inequalities, they need to have, they need stable investment, fair partnerships, and recognition of their leadership. Recently, creative health is a big thing. It's the use of arts and culture. I've read the book by Daisy Fancourt. I'm a big fan of this. But I've also noticed that the funding doesn't necessarily always have enough advocates for the underserved communities. So we've done a creative health project and fostered that in Newham for underserved community. We've called it a creative chai and chat. In the end, we had 3 organizations working together, having songs, prose, dance, and drama monologues, talking about, would you believe, vaccinations, because they believed us and because we built that trust. So fifth, we need to build bridges across the communities without flattening difference. As I said, the Bangladeshi, Black African, Caribbean, Somali, Pakistani, Romanian, Roma, white working class communities, they're all not the same. Each community has its own history, assets, challenges, and leadership. But there's a shared principle of respect, trust, co-production, and equity that can connect that work. The next 20 years are not going to be easy. Inequalities are deep, and trust has been damaged. I appreciate that. Resources are constrained. Communities are tired of being consulted without seeing the change. But there is this opportunity, and I just want to end on that. There is this knowledge in our communities. There is this leadership in our faith spaces, community centers, grassroots organizations, and local networks. There is this creativity in the voluntary sector that Voice4Change England has given me that look into. The amount of free seminars that you guys do is just phenomenal. There is a commitment among public servants who want to work differently. I'm not the only one. There's a growing recognition that equity can't be delivered from the center alone. There are the bridge builders, people like myself who work in the system with lived experience of being brought up in a mining village in Mansfield, but also of Bangladeshi lived experience as well. Diversity of NHS workforce. This is what I mean, where, the system advocate community and vice versa. Partnership has always been and will always continue to be the foundation of every meaningful gain. So that's what Voice4Change England for me represents. That's what 3T seeks to operationalize. And that's what our work has shown. Trusted leaders, trusted places, trusted voices. Because when communities trust people, places, and voices involved, when systems trust the communities enough to share power, listen deeply, and act differently, then change becomes possible. As your hallowed institution marks 20 years, I want to pay tribute to the organization, to Kunle, to Charmin, the leadership, to yourself, Nina, and the board, your members, Diti, and so many that are working with us all the time. You do so much above and beyond your service. You have created a platform and a voice for change. You have supported communities to be heard. You have influenced those in the system to think better and do better. And you've helped shape partnerships that have a real impact on people's lives. The task now is not just to celebrate the past 20 years, but it's to build the next 20 with courage, ambition, and honesty. A future where equity is not just an aspiration, but it's a standard. A future where community leadership is not invited in at the end, but embedded from the beginning. A future where Black and minoritized voluntary and community organizations are not just seen as peripheral to public service reform, but central to it. And it's a future where trust is not just simply requested from communities, but earned by system through action, humility, cultural safety, and partnership. Thank you, Voice4Change England, for your leadership, your partnership, your continued commitment to change. And thank you for giving me the privilege of being part of this important milestone. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Riyad, for that very passionate and insightful words, and for also recognizing the work that our organization does. I did say our staff do like a lot of photos, so this was a right celebration and an insight to the audience present here today, about the diversity and the type of collaboration and the flavor of this diversity and partnership that, we are building. An example here was the Bangladeshi health, kind of partnership that we work with. So thanks very much, Riyad, for this fascinating talk. Are there any very quick questions for Riyad at this moment? Because I'm conscious of the time and I'd like to move us on.
I think, Nina, we could take all the questions at the end.
At the end, maybe, if that's okay, yeah. Riyad. So on to the next speaker for this evening. It's my great delight and pleasure to invite an organization, an old friend to Voice4Change England, and Maddie Deforge, who is the Chief Executive Officer for NAVCA, which is the National Association for Voluntary and Community Action. Maddie, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I'm Chief Executive of NAVCA. We're the umbrella body for local infrastructure organisations, also in God's own country, Carluke in Sheffield. And I'm conscious that I'm standing between you and the rest of your evening and tea, and also that by going behind Charmin and Kunle and Riyad, that I'm going to try and build on some of the things that have already been said, that there may be some duplication and some reiteration perhaps of some of the common messages. But thinking about NAVCA, we are very much about thriving communities. That's at the heart of what we do. Social justice drives our mission, and our ambition as set out in our strategy is very much around influencing system change, shaping a more fair and equal future, driving justice and social action. So you can see why partnership with Voice4Change England feels like a really natural place to be. And we really hope that we can do more with it. But particularly that alignment means that I'm really proud to be speaking as Voice4Change England hits 20. That feels like such a significant milestone. So I will reflect on some of the things that have changed in those 20 years, the context in which Voice4Change England was established, think about some of the challenges, the opportunities, and then the collaborations. And I especially want to touch on collaborative leadership, which I think is the key to unlocking the opportunities, addressing the challenges that we face. But I started off thinking about 20 years ago and what has changed over the 20 years that Voice4Change England has been in existence, the context in which you were established. And that was the year that the Stern Review published its really influential report on climate change, still relevant today. It was the year that Google acquired YouTube, spinning out into some of the AI and the digital transformation that we're seeing. It was the year of the Scottish smoking ban, which paved the way for England to follow a few years later, one of the key things around addressing health inequalities. And it was the year of the assassination of Alexander Litvinenko. But it was also the year that the Racial and Religious Hatred Act came into force, the year of the Stephen Lawrence cold case review, the Metropolitan Police corruption inquiry. And it struck me how many of those things still resonate, and they really impact on the way we live our lives and how we work as a voluntary sector. And they still resonate on the challenges that we face around climate change, AI, fairness and equity in policing. Some of them made a difference, the smoking ban. Others didn't go far enough to tackle the really endemic issues we face around how we police, the same issues around race equity and discrimination, for example. So I really wanted to reiterate, we live in challenging times, as Cunley's already set out, despite or because of those events from 20 years ago. And as a sector, the communities for the next 20 years are going to be really challenging. Recognising those challenges, I think, puts us on the front foot to address them. And so I want to think about what they might be, what the challenges we face for the next 20 years, and I guess hope that by the end of that period, we've gone further to address them. So I think the financial sustainability has got to be the big one, especially for the voluntary sector, but also the public sector. We're seeing rising demands, increasing costs, unstable income sources, short-term funding, which really creates significant ongoing financial pressure for organisations, both large and small. There's a challenge around power imbalance in systems. The risk that voluntary sector organisations are included in systems, but without having sufficient influence or resources to really be a key part of them and take their place fully. And that's particularly pressing for Black-led organisations that are looking to address power imbalance arising from race as well as from sector. There's challenges around fragmentation, competition for funding, that really undermine collaboration and weaken collective voice. And again, we need to make sure we make space for smaller organisations, make sure the voice of marginalised communities comes to the fore, and that they are part of, that they lead collaborations with real influence. Sharman's already mentioned challenges around the workforce, and I'd add volunteering pressures to that. Recruitment, retention, changes in volunteering patterns are really significant. How do we engage people, retain people with the skills and experience that we need? And as pressures on households increase, how can we make sure that volunteering opportunities are available to all and they're driven by communities and community need? Cunley talked earlier on about the social and political pressures and instability, this moment of cusp, the significance of today in a by-election, and increasing inequality, social division, changing expectations present really broad challenges. Organisations especially risk becoming crisis responders rather than focusing on long-term system change. And how do we really address that so we live in a fair, equal, just society? And there's two big challenges driven by the wider context we haven't really touched on a huge amount. So the impact of AI and of climate change. And both will really impact on what we do as a sector and how we do it. And if we can harness the opportunities of AI in a really safe, measured, proportionate way, does it help the capacity issue we've talked about? How can we adapt to climate change as well as to respond to the impact it has on our day-to-day lives? So all of those challenges could be a depressing picture, and especially how many of them resonate with the challenges and the issues that were being addressed 20 years ago, and the disproportionate impact they have on Black communities. And clearly Voice4Change England has had an impact for many, but collectively there is still more we need to do. So I guess my question is, how can we work together better to achieve that, to move it to a more positive space? And there's definitely opportunities coming, again, over the next 20 years. The first one around the VCS as a core system partner. We've got growing recognition, I think, in public systems, including in health, in prevention, in local economic development. And no one organisation can take on that mantle alone. We need collective voice and influence. And Riyadul has already spoken to this in the health context. There's opportunities around the growth of place-based and the prevention agendas, a stronger emphasis we're seeing on prevention, addressing the social determinants of health, moving to a whole society approach as well as a medical approach to health creation as well as ill health prevention. And that creates opportunities for VCSE organisations to lead community-driven solutions, and we've heard some of those already with the Bangladesh partnership. But making sure that is responsive to need, addresses inequalities, is rooted in real experience is really key. And we need to make the space for the voluntary sector so we're seen as connectors, as sources of vital intelligence, essential providers of support, as community infrastructure, in a really consistent and meaningful and a way that works right across the country. We've talked a bit about digital and data developments, how we can improve use of data, technology, digital tools, how we can use that to strengthen impact and influence, provided we use it effectively and harness it well, providing the air cover that Riyadul just spoke about. AI is a threat, but it's also a huge opportunity to really demonstrate the impact of what we do, the intelligence, the data that we can bring to the fore as a sector. There's a challenge for sure around funding and social value, and there's that policy focus on grants, creating opportunities for flexible, for mission-aligned funding, for different types of income, different types of investment that we can work through. And finally, I think there's something around collaboration and system leadership, which kind of takes back to where we started, as voluntary sector organisations have a strong opportunity to act as system conveners, to bring together different sectors to address complex challenges. I think in many ways our superpower as a sector is the way that we can see things holistically rather than in silos, take a whole person, a whole community approach to drive change. So there are opportunities, there's potential, there's lots we can do. And I guess the question then is, how do we realise those benefits? And it's already been touched on several times, but I think that collaborative leadership and the value and impact it has is fundamental to realising those opportunities, to creating the society we want to see. I think if our superpower as a sector is our ability to work across silos, perhaps our key skill needs to be collaboration, to work together, to be generous, and do that to achieve great change. Collaborative leadership, I'd see as the essence of that. Perhaps a definition around leaders who prioritise shared decision-making, who see joint problem solving as the way forward, who build partnerships across boundaries rather than top-down hierarchies. I think collaborative leadership empowers stakeholders to pool resources, to engage communities, to drive system change. But if that was easy, we'd all be doing it already. It would have already happened. And I think it demands a really highly tuned skill set so you can balance facilitation and guidance, create a culture of trust, inclusivity, shared responsibility. Collaborative leaders need emotional intelligence, adaptability, strong communication, and empowerment. They foster trust and inclusivity, and they share decision-making, empowering teams to achieve collective goals. It's hard, and many of the challenges I talked earlier on mitigate against it rather than driving towards it. So it can feel like we're swimming against the tide when we're trying to be collaborative leaders rather than individual leaders. But I do think that being collaborative leaders is really important in the voluntary sector, where as organisations and as individuals, we tackle complex social issues and we do it with limited resources. We rely on trust, partnerships, influence. We haven't got positional authority. We work at the interface of systems and communities. It's what we do. We're about people, households, communities. We're not segmented or defined by conditions. And as again, Connolly referred to earlier, we're in a period of significant structural change, political instability, not just today as a significant day in terms of the by-election, but more widely around local government reorganisation, the reconfiguration of integrated care system, the increased focus on public service partnerships. So with all of that, how do we really work together, collaborate, join forces for collective good? And that brings me to 4 things I really wanted to focus on around systems leadership and the collaborative leadership space, which was kind of the question that Sharman asked me to talk to. So there's 4 things I wanted to pull out. 1 around shared purpose. So whether within the voluntary sector, with public sector partners, with civic institutions, with the private sector, we need to really align goals. Be really clear about what is the change we want to see and how can we work together so we both reach the goals that we aspire to. How can we lift each other and share skills, resources, knowledge and connections to achieve that? The second one's around breaking down silos. And one of my frustrations with government structures can be the specific problem that individuals focused on. They want to fix things, improve things, but in a narrow scope. And that isn't how people live their lives, where everything is connected, where housing, health, work, transport, education all come together. I think if we can put organisational self-interest to one side, look at the big picture across boundaries, we're more likely to tackle and then to solve, to move forward on the big problems. The third area I think around is power and inclusion. It's at the heart of what Voice4Change England is about, and what many of you are about, to really drive change, to actively manage power dynamics so that marginalised communities and smaller organisations who aren't otherwise heard have got influence. And one of the key and perhaps overlooked aspects of collaborative leadership is an appreciation for, a drive for, inclusivity and diversity. It's about valuing diverse perspectives, ensuring all voices heard, and integrating different skills, backgrounds and viewpoints so that power is distributed. Being deliberately inclusive is fundamental. And the final one I wanted to pick out is around facilitation over control. It's about, as leaders, being connectors who bring people, resource and ideas together, especially where they might not connect otherwise. There's a real skill to finding the common grounds, to building trust, and crucially, to letting go. It can feel uncomfortable. I think if it doesn't feel uncomfortable, we're probably not going far enough. It needs a level of vulnerability. I think that facilitation over control is where the power lies, where the magic dust is. Now, I'm sure in all of that, I've not said something you don't already know. You live, breathe and work with all the time. But I think it's always worth stopping and thinking about it consciously, recognising the difficulties and recognising the challenges and the balances we have to make every day to navigate change, influence others and support social justice. And just very briefly, in the space of that collaborative leadership, we've been working with NAVCA members to take our place. We need to work with BME-led organisations to drive social justice, but also take responsibility for driving change ourselves. In that space as NAVCA, next week we're starting the second cohort of an allyship programme. We're working with Diversity Marketplace to create a space for members to come together and develop their approach to allyship, to share experiences and learning and formal training. And my ambition really is to continue that programme so that locally we have people in different roles and places who are confident, articulate, informed, and will drive changes from perspectives in their own sector, that we can share power, purpose and understanding. It's not a single solution, but perhaps part of a wider approach. I think perhaps what I'm getting at is that I think advancing racial equity can't be for Black-led organisations alone. And we want to be collaborators, allies, to work with you to drive change. That's the only really way I think we'll make sufficient progress right across the piece. Let me finish with hope for the next 20 years. I think that yes, there's more to do. Yes, it builds in what has already started. Yes, it needs to tackle some of the same issues where we haven't made sufficient progress or advancement. But my hope is that as a sector, we grow in importance over the next decade, that our influence increases, that our voice is heard, and that strengthening influence will enable us to improve race equity, to maintain our core mission around community-led social change, enabling people to do the stuff that matters to them, to bring purpose, joy, and connections to all our lives, as well as builds bridges and community harmony right across the piece. And I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Oh, Maddie, that was excellent. And I really liked your kind of fourfold ways of thinking and helping us think along. It's a great partnership we've had with NAVCA all these years, and we really hope to work with yourselves again, just to kind of take on these challenges that you've mentioned around, you know, to name one, local kind of government reorganization and the challenges that might bring. So lots to think about there. Can I invite now any specific questions for, or just let's, if it's okay and agreeable, Maddie, I'm conscious of the time, it's almost 8 o'clock. If there are some questions in the chat, and whilst I give time to people to pull any other questions in mind, I'd like to just maybe Kunle, we could start. There was earlier a question in the chat from James Murphy, who wanted to know how the extent of our preparedness for the eventuality of, you know, how do we take on damaging narratives of that are divisive and that come from the right, and whether we have a crisis plan to place, you know, alongside others of kind of how do we take this on. So although this is not a political forum, but obviously the question, James, I thank you for that, because these are challenging times, and we won't have a full-scale response, but I will invite the director for Voice4Change to maybe give you a brief response to that. But thank you for raising that question.
Yeah, thank you, James, for the question. I think it's a really important one, and it's one which we are likely to have to face perhaps more even quickly than we think. There are, organizations from the race equality sector met in Birmingham just before Christmas with ARE, and this topic actually came up and formed part of the discussion. So some organizations were even making direct overtures to reform, in fact, attended their party conference. Other organizations, there was a point made, I think, by Lee Jasper, that in terms of partnership and allyship that Maddie has referred to, we need to look at the bridges that we need to build across issues of class, not just race. And so I think there is a challenge for us in developing new policy and new ideas, and perhaps even new tactics, in terms of how we build a coalition that takes the interests of working class people forward. I think the failure to address issues of class has opened the door to the right, who've been more successful in actually making those connections. The left, as we currently see it, has failed abysmally. And I feel that we need some fresh and new ideas. The cost for that, I think, is going to be difficult. These things are not easy, because we're talking about new ways of working. And it's great having Maddie here. Maddie may or may not be aware that there was a time when, in fact, Voice4Change and NAVCA were going to merge into one new organization. It didn't work out for one reason or another. But the fact is that many organizations, even in the race equality sector, have also attempted mergers and greater integration. It's been difficult. So I think the road ahead is going to be quite difficult, but we have to forge new alliances if we're going to survive. And believe me, as I've said, do not underestimate what has happened, what's about to happen tonight, because I believe we're probably closer to the next general election than perhaps we realize. And if that election comes, as I think it will happen next year, then the timeline that we're working against could be a very short one.
Thank you very much, Carl. Kunle, and I have Carl's hand raised. So, Carl.
Thank you, Chair. I'm being a bit presumptuous, really. I don't know if this is how you're up to, the questions come in, but I did really want to just bring in this point, if that's okay. Maddie and the other speakers, I thought that was excellent. Thank you so much. And I do think we just need to get real about what's happening and the context of. So, Maddie, that was really helpful. And I think part of that is how we view race equality ourselves and EDI ourselves, because you're quite right, Maddie, a lot has changed in those 20 years. And the era that we are in now, we talk about EDI and equality as if it's something that we would like to have, whereas previously it was something that we expected to have. And the narrative has changed even in our vocabulary around EDI. And I think the challenge is, what do we really think we expect as a human right and a basic, because some would consider that, even in better times, and I put in the chat about the legislative framework around EDI in terms of public service agreement targets, neighbourhood renewal targets, and a framework responsibility to ensure public service agencies were seen and reportable towards working, towards EDI outcomes. All of that went with austerity, with Cameron and Osborne, right? And it's that lack of macro context now that everyone is running around in this kind of fog and doing things. So what do we expect EDI to look like in our own mind, much less what we are expecting from mainstream services to provide?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carl. And I totally agree. And Carl is one of our trustees, as you know, founding trustees at Voice4Change. And I'd just like to pick up one more question. Sorry, James, it's again yours, and it was with regards to AI. And Charmin, I'd like, because I think it came up in your kind of slides. So I think that's an important, it's a bigger question. We're all kind of dealing with it, but I'll bring in my colleague Charmin to quickly respond to that. Thanks, Charmin.
Thanks, Nina. I haven't seen the question in the chat, but
okay,
James,
so it's I can tell you what that is. That James is interested to know if people feel the use of AI as a gap filler is building new capacities in the sector that could yield positive outcomes in the years to come. So, it was in the context of one of the slides where you were presenting it both as a, useful thing, but also, the disadvantages.
Thanks, James. I think in the context of the findings of our sector mapping report, all BME organizations felt compelled to use AI rather than knowing fully about it. Hence, we have developed our AI-based project management, marketing, communications workshop, and fundraising. So people are more aware of the ethical use of AI. With using with caution, being fully aware, but I think because of the capacity constraints, they feel compelled to use AI, not to build up. Yes, there are lots of advantages of using AI, but we also need to think: is it going to take away the jobs that are really, if you want to build relationship, face-to-face context is really important. Human level connection is really important to build trust. How far is AI going to take that trust building? How far is it going to help us building that trust? And we all want human connection to build trust. And multi-sector, we are all working with not just within our BME VCSE sector, we're working with multi-sector organizations and multiple sectors at the same time. So they have different cultures, different ways of understanding our sector. But in terms of capacity increasing, would AI help us? I think it's something to be wait and to see, because we haven't got enough evidence yet. In terms of the report findings in that context, if you read the full report, you'll see that organizations felt that they had to use AI because they're always, capacity constraints. So it's just AI is fast, but how impactful it is when you're writing a bid. So when we do our, say, grant giving, workshops, we always, write what are, when applicants are writing bids, what funders are looking out for, because, that it's the same standard answers, 10 other applications look the same. Would that, how impactful would it be for the funder? Because you need to bring in your own unique selling point when you're putting a project proposal or funding proposal. So I think in a nutshell, in the context, people felt compelled to use AI rather than increasing the capacity.
Yeah, thank you so much, Charmin. I think we need to have a broader discussion about the use of AI. Certainly, it brings its benefits, and so the health sector has definitely experienced some of the benefits in kind of collating and pulling together and making sense of large volumes of data. However, we have to keep a kind of a cautionary approach to that at the same time, because of the hallucinations and, the more we use AI and how we sort of build the prompts, what we ask of AI. So there is definitely, I'm really pleased that Voice for Change is doing some of these workshop sessions just to build the awareness that these things are also happening. I'm no stranger to it in the university sector as well, when students use AI for their coursework. Certainly, it shows the kind of the gaps in knowledge, and certainly we don't want to repeat those in the things that we do in the charitable organizations, just whilst building efficiencies, being really careful about some of those final outcomes as well. But I think there was another, thank you, Charmin, for responding to that. And yes, please do keep filling in the chat box, but I do wish to acknowledge old colleagues and friends who are here on the call as well, Saifur and also Saqib. But we also have Anjana Roy and Pratima, who also earlier mentioned. So Anjana mentioned they would like to see more initiatives, as Riyad was talking about, keeping staff and volunteers from organizations safe in a hostile kind of political environment, supporting lone workers. Or maybe, Anjana, sorry, it was earlier when perhaps Kunle was talking, really acknowledge the points you're making, because at this kind of time, it's really important to also keep, and I've heard quite a lot of anecdotal evidence from charitable organizations where people are beginning to feel the impact of the hostile environment as colleagues, as workers in charitable organizations providing support services in their local areas. So we're all aware of that. Thank you for making that point. And also, Pratima, what you said earlier about the back office support in terms of using AI for organizations, which is really important. And it'd be good to collaborate on this as we look, as you guys look in, using that in Northamptonshire as well. So I think those were some really quick key points I'd kind of extracted from the chat. Since there has been more, but I'd just like to invite, I think Charmin has her hand raised. Sorry, Charmin, over to you.
Sorry,
back to you. Yes.
Thanks, Ina. Sorry, I'm conscious about the time. Maddie, yes. I was just responding to you that you're concerned about, you heard that because grant being reduced because you can make savings using AI. I don't think I've spoken about that. I think I've spoken about the context of our report findings, that organizations feel compelled to use AI, not grant being reduced, but to use AI on the day-to-day basis because of capacity constraints.
Sorry, it's linked, Charmin. Just that a random expectation from a funder that it can reduce funding, forcing organizations to use AI. It's in a similar sort of space.
Actually, that's a really good point, Maddie. And it's no different. I'm familiar with that environment, dealing with that in a different context. So we really do need to, step ahead with caution and care, because while it seems very appropriate in the health sector, we do have challenges elsewhere about, kind of authenticity. So I totally agree with you. Colleagues, are there any other questions at this point? I've not referred to the chat just yet, but if my colleagues at Voice for Change have, please do pick that up. If not, is there anything else? Any colleagues?
Can I just respond to
yes, please, Carl.
that second point about safety for staff? And it's a conversation I had with Kunle just last week. I think it's a critical question. It's a critical question because, not only are our staff members in our organizations very anxious right now, our client groups that we serve are extremely anxious. And so I think, part of the answer is the more that we can do in terms of sharing, learning and ways in which we help to keep our communities safe very actively in the very short term in this immediate threat, because there'll be a lot of unreported racial attacks going on right now, and every time there's a protest or every time there's an incident, arguably there'll be a lot of increase in racial attacks, and so people need to be reassured, and I think that's a responsibility on our sector and other sectors to provide that reassurance and guidance about to keep ourselves safe and well. So
absolutely. No, really thank you, Carl. I think that's an important point, and how we kind of share information and sort of knowledge with each other is equally important. I think, colleagues, in terms of timing, I'll probably need to bring this meeting to a close now, but there have been really fascinating discussions, lots of things for us to think about and build on and work on in collaboration with yourselves, in partnership with yourselves. I think today we've kind of created new spaces for partnerships. Already people are suggesting how they want to talk to each other. And that really is a small vignette of, you know, what we do at Voice for Change. Riyad, you said it's about bringing people together, and we certainly do. So I'll hand over to Charmin in a moment, but I'd just like to, you know, in the end, just to say she wants to say a couple of words about our 20th celebrations, obviously, which you're all invited to in advance. And I'd just like to take this moment really to thank our two guest speakers today, this evening, for giving us your time and your wonderful thoughts and insights from your separate sectors, but it really highlights to us the importance of this collaboration and how we bring about change, and certainly working together in many, many different ways and building our kind of, you know, grassroots to community to regional to national kind of impact. We are certainly there to amplify some of those voices, but I'd like to, you know, end with a thanks particularly to our staff who work really hard, starting with Kunle, Charmin, Yana, Sarah, Sophia, Bola, Jessica, Jennifer, Shuki, Diti, Emily, Azad, you know, Abdu and Christabel, Jennifer. I think I've kind of hopefully named everyone, but I think without, you know, their hard work, without the extra going that extra mile, we wouldn't be here. You know, all the hard work that goes on behind the scenes to run AGM smoothly, planning for future events as well. I really wish to thank, on behalf of my trustees, a huge vote of thanks to our staff for doing, you know, such working with excellence and, you know, keep building this ethos of Voice for Change, which extends, obviously, working with our partners. Thank you very much for that. And a special thanks to my board of trustees, my fellow trustees as well, as we move on to, you know, hopefully bring in more trustees at Voice for Change. I'd really like to note the contributions made both by Carl and Ela as our founding members, trustees for Voice for Change, but especially Ela Chandavarkar, who's our treasurer, who spends you know, enormous amount of time supporting the work that goes on in this organization. So Ela, a special thanks to you. We know it's hard times, and this is simply a reflection of the extent to which trustees also have to sometimes put hands-on support within their organization, which I believe Maddie at NAVCA would be very familiar with. So thank you so much for that effort and that support you show us. I'll now hand over to Charmin to literally just make the final announcements for this evening, but colleagues, trustees, and friends who've joined us this evening, a huge thanks from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Can I have a round of applause virtually for Nina for chairing this AGM? So thank you, Nina, for your hard work in terms of, you know, leading us, and also our board of trustees. And we couldn't have done this, our work, without our director, Kunle. And all our staff members, Kunle, and has been, you know, supporting all of us. Under his guidance, we're doing this work under his leadership. And in terms of our next phase, so watch out for September. You'll be getting invites for our, we are looking for a venue and a date to align a date and a venue together. We'll be having a celebratory event of our 20th year. So keep an eye out for that. In terms of, you know, keep an eye on our website. We'll be publicizing our sector mapping report. There will be some insights that you may take, and there are some sections that would show different regions in England, some of the findings, which you may find useful. But thank you everyone for everyone's attendance today and participation. And I'd like to say a huge thanks to our comms colleagues, Viti, Shuki, Emily and Jess, for working behind the scenes tirelessly to bring about a successful AGM. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Carl, Ela, I think Doreen joined later on, Aman and Nina, wonderful chairing. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening ahead.
Thanks, everyone.
Bring this to a close. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.